We're going to cover a lot of turf here. And so we're going to need all our minutes. Well, even when we cover 4 verses, we still need all our minutes. So what difference does that make? But what happens here as we read this portion, chapter 7 and chapter 8, we're seeing Jesus's last public ministry before Peter makes a confession that he is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And when Peter makes that confession, a new teaching method is introduced by Jesus. He's not doing these public proclamations on the hillsides. He's not preaching from the seashore where people are pressing against him, almost pushing him into the sea. He's going to start honing in on his select few that he is entrusting with this new gospel message. And it's entrusting them with this message to share it with the rest. And so he's going to start narrowing his audience. Not only is he going to start using a new teaching method where he's just teaching a few who are then going to teach a few, who are going to then teach a few, and who are going to then turn the world upside down, but he's also introducing a new teaching. Jesus has proven up until this time that he is the coming Messiah. The deaf are hearing, the blind are seeing, the lame are walking, sins are being forgiven, the dead are being raised to life. Matter of fact, John the Baptist says, "Are you the one, or should we wait for someone else?" And Jesus says, he didn't even have to say yes or no. He just says, "Tell John this is happening. Scriptures are being fulfilled as the prophets predicted." And so up until that time, everybody's like, this is the guy, this is the one, this is it. And then after this last public ministry happens, Peter makes his confession. Jesus starts talking about suffering and dying. And he mentions being raised again, but they're still stuck on suffering. You're the Messiah. We just declared you the Christ, the Messiah. What are you talking about suffering? I'm going to go through 14 kangaroo trials. I'm going to be crucified by the Romans and the Jews, joining together, Herod and Pilate, longtime enemies, joining together to rage against me. And the disciples are, of course, confounded by all this. So it changes Jesus's teaching method, and his teaching changes. So we're looking at his last, you might say, public ministry before things take a turn. And he's headed to the cross. Interestingly, it's to the Gentiles. It's to the Gentiles. He's ahead of schedule, basically. The first part of chapter 7 is about defilement. Who is the audience that Jesus is talking to at the beginning of chapter 7? It is Pharisees and scribes and Sadducees and lawyers. They're coming up from Jerusalem. An entourage has been sent to Jesus to question him and try to trip him up. And then he starts talking. And basically in that portion, Jesus declares all food clean. Yes, bacon, baby. Pork chops. Woo. He declares all food clean, and he talks about defilement comes from within, not from without. And so he's making these things, and he's saying these hard things to the Pharisees and scribes. While he's making this beautiful proclamation, declaring all things clean, he also kind of points a finger at the Pharisees and the scribes when he says, you have laid aside the commandments of God because you hold to the tradition of men, the washing of pitchers and cups and many other such things you do. And then he also says, Moses says, honor your mother and father. But you say, if a man says to his father or mother, whatever profit you might have received from me is Corban. In other words, Mom and Dad, I can't take care of you because I'm giving it to God. Now, my mom may feel that way sometimes, like, when are you going to have time with me? When are you going to be done writing that Bible study? When are you going to fix my computer? She's constantly saying that. And I'm saying, Corban. In other words, what the Pharisees could do is they would take all their profits and all their money and they would offer it to God, and the mom and dad would have need, and they're like, sorry, Mom and Dad, I gave it to God. And so in this discourse about declaring defiled things clean, he also is pointing some very heavy-handed pointing at the Pharisees and scribes. So when it says here at the beginning of our portion in chapter 7, verse 24, from there, and look at what else he says at this list that he ends with as he's talking to the Pharisees and scribes. The Pharisees and scribes said, these are words appropriate for the common people, the masses. But he's saying them to Pharisees and scribes. And he's saying, from within our own heart, out comes these things. The heart of man proceeds evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, and evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these things come from within, defile a man. Pharisees and scribes are like, why is he telling us that? Look at us. We've given up a lot. We've even given up taking care of our mom and dad for the Lord. And here he is pointing the finger at us. And so it seems, for one or two reasons, Jesus arose and went to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And hopefully you see it on your map in the book that is in Gentile region. Jesus has not been there before. And I don't think he goes there afterwards. Why is he going there? It says he entered a house and wanted no one to know about it. But he could not be hidden. It could be that he went to Tyre and Sidon because he had one desire. I've got to get out of the reach of the Pharisees and their schemes for me. I might have pushed them a little too far. And this is not God's timing. It's not my Father's timing. Or it could be he's just tired, but he's been tired from ministry before and he didn't have to go so far. All he had to do was wake up early when everybody else was snoozing. He'd wake up early, spend time apart with God and just himself, Father and himself. So if he needed to pull away and rest a while, I don't know if going so far was necessary. I'm thinking more and leaning more towards wanting to get out of the reach of the Pharisees and their schemes because things are at a height right now. Opposition is at a height. His popularity is at a height. And it's coming to head. And so he goes to this Gentile region. And I'm sure the disciples were like, what are we doing here? Why are we here? It was bad enough that you took us through Samaria. Now this. I just want to say the reason we're going to cover so much turf is because we are going to look at how Jesus ends up going to the Gentiles in his last part of his public ministry before his method and teaching changes. We could say 724 to 8:10 is Jesus ministering to the Gentiles. We can say it was intentional from the very beginning. He did get up and go there. He's ministering to the Gentiles. It's new. It's startling to the disciples. They're wondering, did he make a wrong turn? What's got into him? And then from verse 8:11 to 21, we see him going back to the Jews one more time, and it's a very hostile environment. He's like giving the Jews one last chance, and they meet him with hostility and unbelief and demands. A different kind of demand than what the woman of the Syrophoenician woman gave. And so 724 to 8:10 is him working with the Gentiles. So we're going to read through that portion, and then we're going to come back to the Syrophoenician women particularly. Here we go. From there, Jesus arose, left the Pharisees, the scribes, the rulers, the leaders, the people who were leading the masses. You look on your leaders and you're thinking, oh, where the leader goes, the people go. And that's exactly right. And Jesus, I'm sure, was heartbroken. And he arises, goes to Tyre and Sidon. On your maps, hopefully you see that. It's right on the sea coast in the upper part of it, right above Galilee. Wealthy shipping area. It was definitely, it's the Lebanon today, and it was definitely not Jewish at the time. And Jesus goes up there. He entered a house, wanted no one to know about it, but he could not be hidden. And lo and behold, there's another woman that's breaking into a house, and she's saying what? Instead of anointing his feet like Luke 11, a woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard about him, and she came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Gentile, Some translations say Greek. Worse than that, he was a Syrophoenician by birth. It's like saying Syria today to the Israelites. It's the same kind of uprising. And he kept asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter. But Jesus said to her, I like Matthew's rendition. The first thing he did was meet her with silence. But then Jesus said to her, let the children be filled first, for it is not good or proper to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. And she answered and said to him, yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs under the table eat from the children's crumbs. Then he said to her, for this saying, for this logos, for this saying, go your way. The demon has gone out of your daughter. And when she had come to her house, she found the demon gone out and a daughter lying on the bed. So in this particular rendition, it doesn't mention anything about her faith. It's her words. Or as Margaret says, it's her quick wit. She's a bit fearful because she says she's a slow processor and but this woman was quickly processing for her daughter. Again, departing from the region of Tyre, he goes up to Sidon. He goes up to Sidon and he came through the midst of the region of the Decapolis to the Sea of Galilee. So he's going from Tyre up to Sidon, kind of like making a sweep around so that he can avoid going directly through Galilee. He could go from Tyre back to the Sea of Galilee and go through the Jewish area and the regions that belong to the tribes. Instead, he goes up to Sidon, works his way around, and comes down into Decapolis. In other words, we are talking about Gentile region. The woman says, yes, Lord, but even the little dogs get crumbs from the master's table. And it's as if he says, you know what? That's a good vision plan. That's a good strategy. I want to go do that. And he ends up spending that whole time sharing the crumbs with the Gentiles in that region. And so he goes up to Sidon, works his way around, comes down through the midst of the region of the Decapolis to the Sea of Galilee. And lo and behold, how were they met? How was he met? Some friends brought to Jesus one who was deaf and had a impediment in his speech, and they begged him to put his hand on him. I love friends. I love good friends. He was deaf, had a speech impediment, and his friends brought him to Jesus. This is Gentile region. This lady in Tyre, she comes to Jesus. She heard about his fame. These friends hear about his fame. I'm taking my friend who's deaf and impeded with speech. And they bring him and they took him to him. And Jesus takes him aside from the multitude and he puts his finger in his ears. I mean, this is kind of defiling in and of itself. And then what's even more defiling, he spits and touches him on his tongue. You know how your mama go, let me get those eyebrows for you. Stop. But Jesus does it. He spits and touches his tongue. Defiling, most would say. There's something about Jesus. Then looking up to heaven, Jesus sighed and said to him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. And immediately his ears were open and the impediment of his tongue was loose and he spoke plainly. Then he commanded them that they should tell no one, but the more he commanded them, the more widely they proclaimed. So this whole idea of Jesus trying to hide, it's not working. Paparazzi are following him. And then these people are telling, anyway. And they were astonished beyond measure. And these Gentiles declared, he has done all things well. He makes both the deaf to hear and the mute to speak. It's the Gentiles that just having this small encounter with him has said he has done all things well. Has the Jews ever said that? Did the Pharisees ever say he has done all things well? Did his family make the declaration, lo and behold, we've assessed the quality of his miracles and he's done all things well? No. He's doing this by the finger of the devil. He's doing it, just a few things. And the Gentiles declare, he has done all things well. He makes both the deaf to hear and the mute to speak. In those days, The multitude being very great and having nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said to them, I love his motivation. I have compassion on them, on the multitude, because why? Because they're with me. They have continued now for 3 days to be with me, and they have nothing to eat. Why are they impoverished? Because they didn't go to work. Whatever excuse you might say, but they were with Jesus. And if I send them away hungry to their own houses, they will faint on the way, for some of them have come from afar. He wants to take care of them in their negligence, in their poor planning. He wants to take care of them in their hunger for having spent time with them, because he has compassion on the multitude of these Gentiles. Then his disciples answered him and said, how can one satisfy these people with bread here in the wilderness? And he asked them, well, how many loaves do you have? And they said 7. So he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground. He didn't have his disciples do it like he did with the 5,000. And he took the 7 loaves, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to his disciples to set before them. And they set them before the multitude. They also had a few small fish, and having blessed them, he said to set that also before them. So they ate, were filled. They took up 7 large baskets of leftover fragments, and those who had eaten were about 4,000, and he sent them away. So in this feeding that is different from the feeding of the 5,000 that just happened in the previous chapter. The previous chapter was up there near Capernaum. And that's where Jesus fed the 5,000. It was a Jewish audience. Jesus right here is feeding crumbs to these 4,000. This is to the Gentile audience. When he's feeding the Jewish people, the 5,000, the bread and the fish, he picks up how many baskets of leftovers? 12. When he's feeding the Gentiles, 4,000, these bread and fish, he gets 7 baskets of leftovers. Jesus is well capable of feeding the Jews and the Gentiles. His bread, his crumbs are for both. He's almost as if he's giving us a movie trailer of what's going to happen next on God's agenda. It's going to be inclusive. It's going to involve everybody. We'll get back to that when we look more closely at the Syrophoenician woman. And so he feeds the 4,000, collects 7 baskets. These Gentiles are very excited and satisfied. But immediately, Jesus gets into the boat with his disciples, and he goes across from Decapolis region over to Magdala, or Dalmanutha, which is not on this map, but it's right next to Magdala on the map. Dalmanutha. He is going back to the Jewish region, and he's going to see how are the Jewish people feeling after my last discourse with them. This is how it goes down. Then the Pharisees, and Matthew says Sadducees, and these two people, these two groups, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, are at odds with one another. The Pharisees think more about spiritual things, the supernatural things. They think about angels and spirits and God's law, and they want to know what God's intention was. The Sadducees, on the other hand, are like, let's talk about the ethics. Let's be Thomas Jefferson and cut out all the miracles. We don't want to talk about angels, spirits, resurrection. No. Tell us what the moral system is. We need an ethic. We need a worldview. And so these two are at odds with one another. But in this point, they came together. The Pharisees and the Sadducees came out and began to dispute with Jesus. He comes across the sea, the place where the Gentiles declared he has done all things well, the place where they are full of astonishment after they have eaten. He goes across the sea, feeling high, like, ooh, wouldn't that be great? He gets to the other side, and there immediately a dispute arises, seeking from him a sign from heaven, testing him. These rulers, these people that have heard the news, that have come and tested him, they've seen how Jesus has met all of human maladies, the material things, the mental things, the moral things. Jesus has an answer for them. He's seeing how they've seen the marvel of his wonder-working power, healing diseases, casting out demons, raising the dead, blatantly forgiving sins, and demonstrating his authority and right to do so. They saw it all. They were at odds with them. Who are you to forgive sins? Only God can do that. How can you cast out demons unless you're in league with him? They saw all these things, and now they're asking him for a sign. Maybe just one more and they'll understand. Just one more will. No, he knew no sign would suffice. It's not going to be enough. It'll never be enough unless something happens in their own heart. They come out, meet him, and they said, we want a sign from heaven, testing him. And he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, why does this generation seek a sign? Assuredly, I say to you, no sign shall be given to this generation. No more. It's not enough. You have the woman, Syrophoenician woman, one was enough. You have the deaf mute and his friends, they saw it and they say he does all things well. You have these 4,000 hungry Gentiles and they're like, we are astonished. And you have these Pharisees who saw Jesus raise people from the dead. And Jesus left them. He left them and he's going back to Gentile territory. He left them and setting into the boat again, departed to the other side. It's almost like maybe things have cooled down. Maybe they've changed their mind. Maybe they've processed it. They've had the time think about it. I'm going to go over and test the waters one more time. And we may do that with our own relationships. We may have to say, is this for real? Maybe I'll loan him $10 more and hopefully he doesn't spend it on drugs. I'm just going to test it. Bummer. And Jesus departs. He left them and getting to the boat again, departed to the other side. Now the disciples had forgotten to take bread, and they did not have more than one loaf with them in the boat. And Jesus charged them, saying, take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it's because we have no bread. I don't know. I feel sorry for these guys. I can sympathize with them. And so they're thinking Jesus is talking about the bread, totally missing the beware. Like I said, this is the last of Jesus' public ministry before things start to change. And this is a warning that he thinks is important. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. And they're like, bread? Did someone say bread? You must surely mean physical bread. It's like, oh, Pharisees, disciples, I don't know where you're coming from sometimes, but I would do it in other ways. Is it because we have no bread? But Jesus, being aware of that conversation, said to them, why do you reason because you have no bread? Do you not perceive nor understand? Is your heart hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? Or do you not remember? When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many basketfuls of fragments did you take up? 12. And when I broke the 7 for the 4,000, how many large basketful of fragments did I take up? 7. And he said to them, how is it you do not understand? That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the teachings, the heart that hardens like the Pharisees, the heart that gets too overly righteous, that gets hardened, that gets caught up in the law, that gets caught up in the letter instead of the spirit. I am talking about people who are willing to judge others on tit for tat and not look at the pastoral needs. I don't know if the disciples got it or not, but so then they get to Bethsaida on that other side there, and they brought a blind man to him. I love friends. Have I told you that? Here we go. Some friends brought blind men to Jesus. And they begged him, please just touch him. We've heard about it. Why did you go to the other side? And Jesus said, it was a boo-boo. It wasn't worth it. I'm back. I'm amended my ways. And so Jesus took the blind man, just like the deaf man, and took him away. He took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the town. And when he defiled the blind man by spitting on his eyes, it looks defiling, doesn't it? All these things that look defiling. When he had spit on his eyes and put his hands on him, he asked him if he saw anything. And he looked up and said, I see men like trees walking. then I think Jesus's power is running out. I think his battery is getting low. I'm kidding, Peggy. And then he put his hands on his eyes again and made him look up, and he restored and saw everyone clearly. Then he sent him away in his house, saying, neither go into town nor tell anyone in the town. And then Peter confesses Jesus. He confesses Jesus up there at Caesarea Philippi in the Gentile region. All this is taking place in the Gentile region. It's a preview. It's a trailer. It's a precursor to what Jesus is going to do once he comes off the cross. I feel like that 24 and 25, this two-part session of Jesus healing this blind man, first of all, there are some times when we have a Damascus Road conversion like Paul did. He's on the road to Damascus and he is breathing out murderings and threats to the Christians. He's going to kill them. He has an encounter with Jesus Christ and he's immediately changed, cured of all his ailments, and he ends up going into ministry. Then there are others that get it slowly, methodically, one step at a time. It's more like a process than it is a one and done. Our problem is we want it to be stick it in the microwave for 30 seconds and out pops a 7-course meal in our life. It doesn't work that way. But I also think not only does it teach us it's not a one and done kind of a thing, but he's saying, disciples, this is where you're at right now. That whole thing when you didn't understand about the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod and beware of it, you're like that blind man that are just seeing men as trees walking. You're not quite seeing it clearly yet. So I'm going to take you up to Caesarea Philippi so we can have this discussion. And eventually you're going to see men walking as men. So it's almost as if he's testamenting to the disciples. It's going to come. There will be understanding. And we just have to be patient getting to it. So this is all Gentile area, except for the one visit where he gives the Jews one more chance and he does their thing. Now we'll go back and talk about the Syrophoenician woman here. And I really would like to join it together with Matthew 15. Matthew 15 has the same conversation about defilement from within. And then in 15:21, he starts talking about this Syrophoenician woman. In 15:21 of Matthew, he is talking to the Syrophoenician, and it goes like this. I'm just going to read the account. Jesus went out from there and departed to the regions of Tyre and Sidon, and behold, a woman of Canaan, that accursed race. Back in the day, Joshua and his boys were given the edict, go in and slaughter all the Canaanites. Well, they didn't succeed, but totally understandable. That's a very overwhelming task. But this woman was a Canaanite and came from that region and cried out to him, saying, have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David, O Hebrew Messiah, O Jewish Christ, have mercy on me. My daughter is severely demon possessed. And Jesus couldn't answer her a word. Well, he didn't answer her a word. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, send her away, for she cries out after us. Shoo fly. But Jesus answered the disciples and said, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Then she came and worshiped him and did not approach him as the Jewish messianic Messiah. She did not approach him as the son of David. She did not approach him as the long-awaited king of the Jew. She approached him as Lord, help me. And he answered and said, it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. And she said, yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs eat the crumbs which fall from their master's table. And Jesus answered her and said, O woman, great is your faith. Let it be to you as you desire. And her daughter was healed from that very hour. A lot of things there that Matthew introduces is this idea that her first approach to Jesus was recognizing, I know who you are. You are the son of David. You are the Jewish promised one. Like, I wish they could get that. I went to my own family and they couldn't figure that out yet. And you could see the signs I did over there. And here she is crying out, moved by a mother's heart. she's got a lot of strikes against her. She's a Gentile. She's living in the Syrophoenician region, Syria, Lebanon. You know how that goes. She's of the accursed race, Canaanite. She's a woman. And not only that, her daughter is possessed and she's groveling. There's just a lot of strikes against her. And the disciples say, Lord, shoo her away. And I wonder if what Jesus is about to say is a living parable before their very eyes. And he answers her according to the way the disciples and the Pharisees and the teachers would have taught them to respond to her. It's like, no, God promised he was going to come to the Jews first. You don't get any of this unless you proselytize. And so Jesus answers her in silence, first of all, but she keeps persevering. And then the disciples say, send her away. And Jesus says, I've not come except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Then she came and worshiped him. Did not let that discourage her. Lord, help me. And Jesus could not refuse a mother's plead. Yes, she may have been Syrophoenician, but what Jewish mother would not see the heart and understand the cry? Yes, she was Canaanite, but which Jewish person, male or female, could say, yes, it's the daughter? Jairus had the same issue just 2 chapters ago. He was willing to throw his reputation away, like, I feel for that woman. I know what that's like. And so you have the sympathy of heart with her. It is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. And she responds, I'm offended. And I called you son of David. Pah, you're not son of David, you're a bigot. And turned around and left. No, she says, yes, Lord, but even the little dogs eat the crumbs which fall from the master's table. And Jesus said to her here in Matthew, oh woman, great is your faith. The only other person he's ever said that to is another Gentile, the Roman centurion. The only 2 times he saw great faith is in the Gentiles. Let it be done as you desire. And her daughter was healed from that moment on. A matter of fact, in Mark, he says, your daughter is healed. Go find out. She's like, well, I know you walked home with Jairus. I was wondering if you could walk home with me too. No, she didn't say that. She didn't need it because great was her faith. And she walked home and found it just as is. Now, I know we've got a lot of questions here about the dog. First of all, there is the dog that Gentiles were often called, kind of the equivalent of, maybe I should edit this out, the B word. When you want to disparage somebody and call them, let them know that I don't really like you, you call them a dog. The scavenger, the dirty, the marauding, the filthy dogs, you call them a dog, and that's what the Gentiles were called. But here, he calls her in the diminutive form, little dog. A dog that is kept at the house. A dog that is cared for by the children. The picture in your book was chosen intentionally. You have someone feeding the dog from the table. It's not just crumbs falling on the floor. It's not just like, hey, Lucy, clean up the kitchen for me, will you? This is very intentional, and Jesus is being very intentional here. And he's feeding it to the dog. And he says, there's a time coming according to God's plan and timetable when the Gentiles are going to sit up to the table. These dogs are going to be in the chair, dining, Jew and Gentile alike. But here he's very intentional about the feeding of it. God's timetable was, I am going to give the plan of salvation to the Israelite people, to Abraham's children. And Abraham's children are going to be blessed so they can be a blessing. But it got stuck. They're going to be blessed, and it got stuck. There was a clog in the pipe. Whatever the clog is, legalism, fear of defilement, exclusivity, bigotry, prejudice, whatever it was, it got clogged, and the Jews never fully satisfied the edict to go and be a blessing to other nations. They were chosen to be the servant of God that was to feed the rest of the world, and it got stuck. It did not go. They received the blessings, but they did not give the blessings. And so God sends heaven's best, the true servant of God in Jesus Christ, and he ends up giving it to everybody. God's timetable is, after the crucifixion and the resurrection, I'm going to send down my Holy Spirit, and I'm going to tell them, start in Jerusalem, Judah, Samaria, and to the uttermost parts of the earth. And I'm even going to send the Apostle Paul to be a minister unto the Gentiles to spread this word. That was God's plan. And you got this woman here saying to Jesus, can you short circuit the timetable and help me now? Could you do it? Well, first of all, he went to this house to get some rest. First of all, he went to Tyre. He knows what he's doing. He goes to the house to get some rest, and this woman is crying out for him. And he decided, you know what? I ain't got time for this. I'm retiring to my bedroom. No. He comes out and meets her. And he remains in silence. I think it's because he knows full well, but he's also given the disciples an opportunity. How are you going to treat her? I'm getting ready to entrust the gospel into a new community, a new body of believers. How are you going to treat her, oh, predecessors of the church? And they're like, kick her out, get rid of her. This woman is annoying me. Not what I was hoping. And so he says to the disciples, well, I did come to the house of Israel first, just as God promised the Israelites, to the Jew first, then to the Gentiles. It's not good to give crumbs of bread to throw it to the little dogs. And the disciples did not respond, but this woman responded and said, Lord, help me. And he's looking at the assessment. He's assessing the situation. He's seeing the disciples thinking, trying to get her away. And he addresses the woman herself, turns to her, and he says, oh, woman, great is your faith. And the disciples are like, what just happened? What did I miss? You just got done saying the dogs don't get any food. And Jesus says they are going to get the crumbs. Not only are they going to get the crumbs, after the resurrection, they're going to be asked to come up to the table. This woman here has asked me for a preview to the movie. Can I see the premiere, before you release it? Can I experience that? And he says, yes, you can. As a matter of fact, he almost takes her idea here of giving crumbs to the Gentiles, and he does end up using that as his ministry plan for the next few days when he's doing all this region stuff. Oh, woman, great is it your faith. Let it be to you as you desire. And the daughter was healed from that very hour. So it's something to try to come to Jesus as a Jewish Messiah. Jesus did come first to the Jews. He had to keep to that plan. He wanted the Jews to have plenty of opportunity to get back on board with God's plan, that they would be the messenger of the blessing that they were supposed to bless the nations with. They did not get on board with it. We saw that when he went over to Magdala. They did not get on board with it. So Jesus is saying, I have to be loyal to God's plan. But even sometimes, God's order can be short-circuited. Sometimes God will, quote unquote, break the law to heal on the Sabbath day. He will eat with defiled hands. He will spit on people and it end up healing others. When God breaks the order, the natural order of things, the natural law of things, it's called a miracle. Things don't go according to plan as it normally is supposed to be. And this is not going according as it's normally supposed to be. There's a time coming. The plan is after the resurrection, it is going to be for the whole world. Abraham's blessing is going to get out to everybody. Just about the home visits here. And also, well, there's a lot of things to say here about the little dogs. There's two ways of saying this. You could say that Jesus already knew what he was going to do, and he gave her opportunity to teach the disciples. He does that. Or it could be that he actually argued her way into his good graces. I'm not saying we can argue our way into God's good graces, but he says, be it according unto your word. This happened because of your word, he says in Mark, and because of your faith here. 5 things I want to say about home visits here. When we're in the home visiting business and visiting others, be mindful of interruptions that could be planned by God. Jesus did not go further into his house to avoid it. He came out and met it. Also, as we read about all these Gentiles that he did all throughout 7 and 8, he met each person differently, grossly Wet willies, spitting on the eyes. Yeah, I know. But he met each one individually, different need. Don't get this idea that I can come. I used to do evangelism explosion, where we'd go door to door, and we had one set way. Would you be ready to meet your maker if you were to die tonight? That was our opening question. People love meeting us at the door. Like, who are you, stranger? And why am I talking to you? But we had a set plan that was to meet everybody's need. As we get involved with people, we're going to be relational with them and meet them exactly where they're at. Maybe they need to be spit on. Wait, did I say that? That is not the takeaway principle on home visits. Don't go spitting on people or sticking your finger in their ears. But just know this. When we deal with people, it's always going to be different. You'll never see Jesus healing a blind person the same way. You'll never see him healing a mute or deaf person the same way. It's always different. He'll meet us exactly how we need to be met. Secondly, Jesus was loyal to the truth, to principle. The principle was God had a timeline and a timetable of how he was going to do it. And he was loyal to that. He made exceptions. We need to be loyal to the truth. There are some things we need to take a stand on. No, not all religions are the same. No, not all roads lead to heaven. We have to take a stand on some things. He was loyal to it, but in his loyalty to it, he didn't start pounding his fist and start saying, "Thus saith the Lord." He met them. He stayed true to his principle. Also, look for faith in unexpected places. Who would have thought anyone in Tyre was ready? And yet he knew him as the son of David. He recognized him when the Jews did not. And so sometimes we think, oh, those people will never understand. There's no hope there yet. Yes, go ahead and go to the inner city. Yes, go ahead and go to that club at school or whatever. Look for faith in unexpected places. And from the woman we learn, do not be easily offended. There's a passage in the Psalms that says, "They that love thy law shall not be offended." They that love thy law shall not be offended. It doesn't say they shall not be easily offended. They just shall not be offended. I'm right, I'll take what you said, put it before the Lord. I'll pray about it. I want to consider it, weigh it carefully. And so in a culture like ours today, where it's easy to be offended, they that love the Lord shall not be offended. There's nothing you can say. You can say all the mean things you want about Christians. I'm not going to be offended. The Lord's going to keep on loving you, and so am I. So in our home visits, we've got those 5 things. Be mindful of interruptions as God's possible appointments. Don't deal with everyone the same way. Stay true to the truth. Look for faith in unexpected places, and don't be easily offended, or you could miss out on somebody being delivered. Amen. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we do thank you for your preview that you gave the Gentiles. It was almost as if your heart was bursting. It was like fire caught up in your bones. You could not wait to give it to the dogs, as it were. You could not wait to give it to the whole world. And it was just bursting out of you. You just had to say it. And we're so thankful, Lord, that you cannot keep back the good news, that you cannot keep out the outpouring of your love and the ministry to people around us. We want to be that kind of people where it's just like fire caught up in our bones. We have to shout it. We just can't stop talking about you. We're so in love with you. We so experience you in such a holy way that when someone says, "Well, how you doing today?" "Have I told you about my new boyfriend?" And off we go talking about our new boyfriend. "Have I told you about the encounter I had, what I learned today, this morning with time with God?" That it would be just as natural, and it would be maybe exhausting to our friends, like, "Oh no, not Roger again." But Lord, that we just can't say enough about you. We're just so thankful of how you just could not wait to show what your I guess you could say your Easter gift was going to be. We thank you for it. And Lord, help us to live in the light of it. In Jesus' name, amen.